Captain Jake Morrison was having another boring day on patrol duty. His ship, the USS Defiance, was floating near the edge of human space where nothing ever happened. The coffee was terrible, the stars looked the same as always, and his crew was getting restless. That's when everything changed. Lieutenant Amy Brooks was monitoring the communication systems when she picked up something strange. A weak signal was coming from deep space, and it wasn't human. She called Morrison to the bridge immediately. The signal was broken and filled with static, but their computers were slowly translating it. What they heard made everyone stop talking. Alien voices were crying for help. They called themselves the Kalari, and their home world was being destroyed. Ships were bombing their cities. People were dying. Children were screaming. The Kalari were begging anyone who could hear them to save their people. But here's the weird part. The aliens kept calling humans Deathworld survivors. They said Earth was so dangerous that only monsters could live there. To them, humans were like mythical warriors from a planet of nightmares. Morrison laughed at this because Earth seemed pretty normal to him, but the aliens were genuinely terrified of what humans might be capable of. Amy played the message again. The Kalari explained that the Dominion Empire was attacking them. This empire was famous across the galaxy for one thing: they enslaved entire planets. When they conquered a world, they either killed everyone or made them slaves. No one had ever successfully fought back against the Dominion. Morrison had a problem. His orders were clear: don't make contact with aliens without permission from Earth Command. But Earth was weeks away by communication, and these people needed help right now. Every minute he waited, more Kalari were dying. The captain looked around his bridge. His crew was watching him, waiting for his decision. These weren't just numbers on a screen. These were real people calling for help, and humanity had the power to do something about it. Morrison's second-in-command, Commander Lisa Parker, quietly said what everyone was thinking. The Kalari had no one else. Every other species in the galaxy was too scared of the Dominion to help. If humans didn't respond, an entire civilization would disappear forever. Jake made his choice. He contacted the other two human ships in his patrol group, the Liberty and the Justice. Within an hour, all three captains agreed. They were going to help, even if it meant court-martial when they got home. The crew started preparing for jump immediately. Engineers checked the engines while weapons officers loaded the guns. Medical teams prepared for casualties. Everyone knew this could be a trap, but they also knew they couldn't just listen to people screaming for help and do nothing. Amy kept monitoring the alien signals. The messages were getting weaker, which meant the Kalari were running out of power or their transmitters were being destroyed. She could hear explosions in the background and people crying. It was heartbreaking. As the ships prepared to jump to hyperspace, Morrison realized something important. This wasn't just about saving the Kalari anymore. This was humanity's first real test in the galaxy. Everything they did would show other species what humans were really like. Were they heroes or cowards? Were they protectors or just another species that looked out for themselves? The jump coordinates were set. The engines were ready. Morrison gave the order to jump, knowing that once they did this, there was no going back. Earth Command would be furious. The Dominion would see humans as enemies. Everything would change. But as the three human ships disappeared into hyperspace, racing toward a battle they might not survive, Morrison felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. For the first time since joining the fleet, he was doing something that really mattered. They weren't just patrolling empty space anymore. They were about to show the galaxy what humanity was made of. The Kalari had called humans Deathworld survivors, expecting monsters. Instead, they were about to meet something the galaxy had never seen before: people who would risk everything to save strangers they had never met. The three human ships burst out of hyperspace and immediately saw hell. New Haven wasn't just under attack, it was being systematically destroyed. Massive Dominion warships hung in orbit like angry metal giants, shooting bright plasma beams down at the planet below. Every shot turned buildings into ash and people into memories. Captain Morrison felt sick to his stomach. Entire city blocks were disappearing in flashes of light. He could see escape pods trying to flee the planet, but Dominion fighters were hunting them down like wolves chasing rabbits. This wasn't a battle, it was genocide. All ships, emergency protocols, Morrison ordered. Lisa, get the Liberty ready for refugee pickup. We're going in. The human ships dove toward the planet at full speed. The Dominion vessels were so busy destroying cities that they didn't even notice the newcomers at first. Morrison used this to his advantage, positioning his fleet between the Dominion ships and the fleeing escape pods. That's when they met their first Kalari refugees. Commander Lisa Parker was expecting something completely different from what she found. The Kalari were tall, thin beings with pale blue skin and large eyes that seemed to glow with fear. When they saw humans for the first time, they actually cowered in terror. "Please don't hurt us," the first Kalari refugee whispered through their translator. "We know you are from the Death Planet. We know you are warriors." Lisa was confused. "Death Planet? We're here to help you." The Kalari refugee, who said his name was Velen, couldn't believe what he was hearing. He explained that everyone in the galaxy knew about Earth. It was famous as the most dangerous world ever discovered. The gravity was so strong it would crush most aliens. The weather was violent and unpredictable. The oceans were filled with monsters. Even the plants were poisonous. "Your world has metal rain," Velen said in amazement. "And ice storms that can freeze entire continents. The ground shakes and mountains explode. How do you survive?" Lisa laughed despite the terrible situation. "You mean thunderstorms and earthquakes? That's just Tuesday on Earth." But Velen wasn't joking. He showed her data from their galactic databases. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world, the highest danger rating possible. Most species couldn't even visit Earth with protective suits. The atmospheric pressure alone would kill them. And humans lived there like it was perfectly normal. Meanwhile, Captain Morrison was learning the same thing from other refugees. What humans considered a beautiful spring day would be a natural disaster to most alien species. Earth's biodiversity, which humans loved, was seen as a nightmare ecosystem where everything was trying to kill everything else. The refugees kept staring at the human crew in amazement. They had expected monsters, but instead found people who were gentle and caring. The humans shared their food, gave medical aid, and treated everyone with kindness. It didn't match what the galaxy believed about Deathworld survivors. That's when the Dominion finally noticed the human ships. A squadron of Dominion cruisers turned away from bombing the planet and moved to intercept the refugees. Their commander sent a simple message: "Unknown vessels, retreat immediately or be destroyed." Morrison's response was equally simple: "No." The Dominion ships opened fire first, launching missiles and energy weapons at the human fleet. They expected the aliens to run away like every other species they had encountered. Instead, something incredible happened. The humans fought back, and they fought back hard. Morrison's tactical training kicked in immediately. Instead of running or trying to defend, he ordered an aggressive counterattack. The human ships moved in ways the Dominion had never seen before, taking risks that seemed impossible, making turns that should have killed the crews from the force. Lieutenant Amy Brooks coordinated the attack from the bridge. Human weapons were different from anything the Dominion had faced. While alien weapons were designed for long-range bombardment, human weapons were built for close combat. The human ships got dangerously close to the Dominion vessels and unleashed everything they had. The battle was over in minutes. 3 Dominion ships were completely destroyed, and 2 more were badly damaged and retreating. The remaining Dominion vessels actually ran away from just 3 human ships, something that had never happened in their military history. The Kalari refugees watched in stunned silence as the mighty Dominion fleet fled from the newcomers. Velen turned to Commander Parker with tears in his glowing eyes. You really are from the Death World, he whispered. But you came to save us. The news of the Dominion's defeat spread across their empire like wildfire. For the first time in centuries, someone had actually beaten them in battle. Admiral Vextar, the Dominion's most feared military commander, couldn't believe the reports. 3 unknown ships had destroyed 5 of his vessels and sent the rest running like scared children. Vextar was furious. The Dominion ruled through fear, and if word got out that they could be beaten, their entire empire would collapse. Rebellions would start on every enslaved world. Their reputation for being unbeatable would be destroyed forever. Mobilize the Third War Fleet, Vextar ordered his staff. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. These Deathworlders will learn what happens when you challenge the Dominion. The Third War Fleet was massive, 150 warships carrying enough firepower to destroy entire solar systems. It was overkill for 3 small human vessels, but Vextar wanted to send a message to the galaxy. Anyone who dared fight the Dominion would face complete annihilation. Back at New Haven, Captain Morrison was getting very bad news from his communications officer. Long-range sensors were picking up the approaching Dominion fleet, and the numbers were terrifying. Morrison had 3 ships and maybe 800 crew members total. The Dominion was bringing enough firepower to level planets. Sir, Lieutenant Amy Brooks said quietly, reinforcements from Earth are still 6 days away. We can't possibly fight that many ships. Morrison looked out at the refugee camps they had set up on New Haven's moons. Thousands of Kalari families were depending on them for protection. They couldn't just abandon these people, but staying meant certain death for his crews. Commander Lisa Parker suggested they retreat and wait for reinforcements, but Morrison shook his head. 6 days is too long. The Dominion will finish what they started here and move on to the next world. We have to buy time somehow. That's when Morrison came up with a crazy plan. New Haven was surrounded by a thick asteroid belt, thousands of rocks ranging from pebbles to mountain-sized chunks of ice and metal. Most military commanders saw asteroid fields as obstacles to avoid. Morrison saw them as weapons waiting to be used. Major Tom Rodriguez, the fleet's chief tactical officer, immediately understood what Morrison was thinking. We turn the whole asteroid belt into a minefield. Use the rocks as cover and make them come to us one at a time. The human crews worked around the clock to prepare. They attached small explosive charges to hundreds of asteroids, turning them into massive space mines. They set up hidden weapon platforms inside the larger rocks. They even rigged some asteroids to break apart and create debris clouds that would blind enemy sensors. When the Dominion fleet arrived, Admiral Vextar expected to find the human ships waiting in open space for a traditional battle. Instead, he found nothing but empty asteroid belt. His sensors couldn't locate the human vessels anywhere. They're hiding like cowards, Vextar sneered. Send in the first wave. Flush them out. 50 Dominion ships entered the asteroid field in perfect formation, just like they had been trained. That's when the humans struck. Asteroids exploded without warning, sending chunks of rock smashing into Dominion hulls. Hidden weapons opened fire from multiple directions. The neat formation became chaos in seconds. But the real shock came when Major Rodriguez launched his boarding parties. The Dominion had never seen anything like human combat tactics. While alien species preferred long-range fighting, humans excelled at close combat. They used the zero-gravity environment like they were born in space, bouncing off walls and using the ship's own structure as weapons. Rodriguez himself led a team that captured a Dominion cruiser in less than 10 minutes. The alien crew was completely unprepared for humans who could fight effectively in damaged, depressurized areas of their own ship. What would kill most aliens just made humans more determined. The Dominion soldiers were terrified. These humans moved through their ship like deadly shadows, appearing from vents and maintenance tunnels that should have been impossible to navigate. They fought with a combination of high-tech weapons and primitive hand-to-hand combat that confused and frightened the aliens. They're not just surviving our counterattacks, one Dominion officer reported to Vextar. They're getting stronger. The more damage we do to their environment, the more dangerous they become. Within hours, the humans had turned the asteroid belt into a death trap. Dominion ships that entered never came out. The few that tried to retreat found their path blocked by more explosive asteroids. Admiral Vextar realized he had walked into a trap designed by minds that thought completely differently from any species he had ever encountered. The humans weren't just fighting a defensive battle. They were hunting the Dominion fleet like predators, using every piece of space debris as a weapon and every shadow as a hiding place. When Captain Morrison's emergency signal reached Earth, it caused the biggest military mobilization in human history. But this wasn't just because 3 ships were in trouble. The message Morrison sent changed everything. First contact established. Genocide in progress. Requesting immediate assistance. Admiral Susan Walsh was in her office when the call came in. She had spent 30 years in the Terran Defense Force, but she had never seen anything like the response that followed. Within 1 hour, every military base on Earth was buzzing with activity. Within 12 hours, ships were launching from orbit. Within 3 days, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled was jumping toward New Haven. But here's what shocked everyone, it wasn't just warships that responded. Hospital ships joined the fleet, loaded with doctors and medical supplies. Construction vessels packed with engineers and building materials followed behind. Even diplomatic ships came along, carrying ambassadors and translators who had been studying alien languages their whole careers. The Kalari refugees couldn't believe what they were seeing when the human reinforcements arrived. They had expected more warriors from the Death World. Instead, they found doctors who immediately started treating wounded Kalari children. They found engineers who began rebuilding destroyed cities before the fighting was even over. They found diplomats who learned Kalari customs and treated their leaders with respect. Colonel Mike Stevens was one of the first to land on New Haven's surface. He was a combat medic, trained to save lives in the worst possible conditions. But when he set up his field hospital, he did something that confused everyone. He put up a sign saying that all wounded would be treated, including Dominion prisoners. The first injured Dominion soldier was brought in by human troops. The alien was terrified, expecting torture or death. Instead, Stevens personally treated his wounds and made sure he was comfortable. When other Dominion prisoners saw this, they couldn't understand what was happening. "Why aren't you killing us?" one captured Dominion officer asked through a translator. "We destroyed your allies' cities. We would have killed you all." Stevens just shrugged. "Because you're hurt and we're doctors. That's what we do." This completely broke the Dominion's understanding of warfare. In their experience, war meant total destruction. Winners enslaved or killed losers. There were no rules, no mercy, no treatment for enemies. But humans fought differently. The human military had something called rules of engagement. They didn't target civilian areas. They tried to capture enemy soldiers instead of killing them when possible. They protected non-combatants even when it made fighting harder. To the Dominion, this seemed like weakness. They were wrong. News of the human way of fighting spread across the galaxy faster than any military intelligence network. Enslaved species on hundreds of worlds heard about the newcomers who fought to free people instead of conquering them. They heard about the Death World survivors who showed mercy to their enemies and rebuilt what they destroyed. On the planet Xerion, the enslaved Anari people rose up against their Dominion overseers. On the moon colonies of Keptar, the oppressed Villani workers seized their mining equipment and turned it into weapons. Across 12 star systems, rebellions began almost simultaneously. The Dominion had never faced anything like this. Their entire military strategy was based on fear and overwhelming force. But how do you intimidate people who are no longer afraid? How do you crush rebellions when the rebels know that help is coming? Admiral Vextar was getting reports that made no sense to him. Human forces were advancing through Dominion space, but instead of conquering planets, they were freeing them. Instead of enslaving the populations, they were helping them set up their own governments. Instead of stealing resources, they were sharing technology and medicine. "They're not acting like conquerors," Vexstar told his staff. "They're acting like liberators." The word didn't translate well into Dominion language because the concept didn't exist in their culture. The idea of fighting a war to free other people instead of gaining power or resources was completely alien to them. But it wasn't alien to the rest of the galaxy. Species that had been enslaved for generations suddenly remembered what freedom felt like. They looked at the humans and saw something they had thought was impossible: powerful beings who used their strength to protect the weak instead of exploiting them. Colonel Stevens was treating patients in his field hospital when a young Kalari approached him. The child had lost her family in the initial bombardment, but she wasn't crying anymore. "Are you really from the Death World?" she asked. Stevens smiled. "Yes, we are." "Then why are you so kind?" It was a simple question that contained the answer to everything. The galaxy had assumed that surviving on a dangerous world would make humans cruel and violent. Instead, it had taught them the value of helping each other survive. The Dominion War ended in a way that nobody expected. After 18 months of fighting across dozens of star systems, Admiral Vexstar's empire finally collapsed. But instead of the traditional surrender ceremony where the losers begged for mercy, something unprecedented happened. The humans offered the Dominion a choice that had never been given in galactic history. Admiral Morrison, who had been promoted to command the entire Alliance fleet, met with the defeated Dominion leadership on the neutral world of Kepler Station. The former enemies sat across from each other in a simple conference room, with translators working frantically to bridge the gap between their languages and cultures. "You have two options," Morrison told the assembled Dominion commanders. "You can choose rehabilitation, work with us to rebuild the worlds you destroyed and learn a new way of living. Or you can choose exile. We'll give you ships and supplies to find uninhabited worlds far from here, where you can start over without bothering anyone else." Admiral Vexstar couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You're not going to execute us? Enslave us? Destroy our fleets?" Morrison shook his head. "What would be the point? Dead people can't learn to be better. Slaves can't choose to change. We want to end this cycle of violence, not continue it." The choice split the Dominion down the middle. About half chose exile, taking their ships and followers to the distant edge of the galaxy where they could live according to their old ways without harming others. The other half, led by younger officers who were tired of constant warfare, chose rehabilitation. The rehabilitation process amazed everyone involved. Dominion soldiers who had spent their lives destroying cities found themselves working alongside human engineers to rebuild them. Former slavers learned trades and skills that created value instead of taking it. Children from both sides played together while their parents slowly learned to trust each other. The real miracle was happening on worlds like New Haven. What had once been a bombed-out wasteland was becoming something beautiful. Human architects worked with Kalari artists to design cities that combined the best of both cultures. Former Dominion engineers used their knowledge of megastructures to build hospitals and schools instead of weapons factories. Colonel Stevens, who had stayed on New Haven to oversee the medical reconstruction, watched in amazement as his field hospital evolved into a proper medical center staffed by doctors from 6 different species. Former enemies were working together to save lives, and the results were incredible. But the most important change was happening in the minds of the galaxy's people. For the first time in centuries, oppressed species began to believe that things could actually get better. The Galactic Freedom Alliance wasn't just a military organization, it was proof that different species could work together as equals. 5 years after the war ended, Admiral Brooks was sitting in her command chair aboard the new flagship Liberty when her communications officer brought her an urgent message. It was another distress call, this time from the far side of the galaxy where a species called the Moravians were being attacked by raiders. Brooks looked at the message and smiled. Her fleet now included ships from dozens of species, all working together under the Alliance banner. The Kalari had contributed their advanced sensor technology. The reformed Dominion members had shared their knowledge of large-scale engineering. Even some of the smaller species had found ways to help. "Prepare the response fleet," Brooks ordered. "All volunteer ships, mixed crews, full humanitarian support package." As the Alliance fleet prepared for another rescue mission, Brooks thought about how much had changed. When this all started, humans were an unknown species from a planet the galaxy feared. Now they were known as the people who showed up when others needed help. The real victory wasn't military, it was cultural. The galaxy had learned that strength didn't have to mean cruelty. That winning a war didn't require destroying your enemies. That the most dangerous species in the galaxy could also be the most caring. Down on New Haven's surface, the proof of this transformation was everywhere. Human children were learning Kalari music while Kalari youngsters played Earth games like soccer and baseball. Former Dominion officers taught engineering classes alongside human professors. The refugee camps had been replaced by thriving communities where multiple species lived side by side. In the central plaza of New Haven's capital city stood a monument that captured everything the Alliance represented. It wasn't a statue of human warriors or a memorial to military victory. It was a simple sculpture showing children from different species holding hands in a circle, with words written in dozens of languages, "Together we are strong." The Deathworlders had become the galaxy's guardians, not through conquest or intimidation, but through an example that proved even the most dangerous beings could choose compassion over cruelty. And across the stars, whenever someone sent out a call for help, they knew the Alliance would answer.